I was having dinner alone at the same diner my late wife and I had visited every Friday for over 30 years when I spotted a pregnant waitress who looked painfully familiar. The moment she lifted her head, my heart froze. It was my daughter-in-law, the woman everyone believed had abandoned my son months ago. The second she recognized me, she rushed into the kitchen. I followed her, desperate for answers. But what she told me behind those swinging doors shattered everything I thought I knew. I am genuinely grateful you chose to spend this time here. Tell me something. Where in the world are you watching from right now? Drop your city or country in the comments. Every single response means something to me. One thing before we go further, certain elements of this story have been crafted for narrative and learning purposes. Names and locations are coincidental, but the lesson waiting at the end of this story is something I believe you needed to hear. Every Friday night for 31 years, Margaret and I sat at the corner booth of Lou's Diner on the intersection of Broad and High Street in Columbus, Ohio. She always ordered the pot roast. I always ordered the meatloaf. We argued about the same things, whether the coffee was too weak, whether the booth cushion needed replacing, whether the waitress with the red sneakers was flirting with the cook. Small arguments. The kind that hold a marriage together like mortar between bricks. Margaret had been gone for 3 years now. But I still came every Friday. I still sat in the corner booth. I still ordered the meatloaf. My name is Harold Mercer. Most people call me Hal, and I am 67 years old. I built Mercer Freight from nothing over 35 years. Started with one pickup truck and a handshake deal to haul furniture across Columbus. Now the company runs 42 freight trucks across 6 Ohio counties, holds 3 federal logistics contracts, and sits on a portfolio worth $68 million, including warehouses, real estate, and long-term shipping agreements. I am not the kind of man who talks about money easily. But I say it now so you understand what was at stake and what I nearly lost before I understood it was being taken. That Friday evening in late November 2024, I was not feeling like a man worth $68 million. My right hand trembled slightly as I reached for the laminated menu, the same menu Lou's had used since 1987, with the same grease stain on the corner of page 2. I had been hiding that tremor for 3 months. My family doctor, Dr. Patterson, told me it was high blood pressure combined with age-related fatigue. He adjusted my medication twice. The dizziness kept coming anyway, sudden disorienting waves that hit me hardest in the mornings, usually an hour or so after my first cup of coffee. "You doing okay tonight, Hal?" said Darlene, the Friday night waitress, appearing at my elbow with a pot of decaf. She was 53, built like a woman who had carried heavy trays for 30 years, which she had. "Fine as I'll ever be," I told her, turning the coffee cup right side up. "Just the meatloaf tonight, Darlene, and some water." "Same as always." She scribbled on her pad without looking down. "You want the green beans or the corn?" "Green beans." "Well, Margaret always got the corn," she said, not unkindly. "I know it," I said. "Green beans for me." She refilled the table's sugar caddy and moved on. I looked out the window at the November dark, pressing against the glass. The parking lot of Lou's Diner held maybe a dozen cars, minivans, pickup trucks, one old Buick with a cracked taillight. This was not the kind of place where people came to be seen. It was the kind of place where people came because the portions were honest, and nobody asked too many questions. My son Nathan had called that afternoon. He called most afternoons lately, checking in, he said, asking about my health, my appetite, whether I was sleeping enough. 3 months ago, he had started bringing me coffee every morning from Rosie's Roast on 5th Avenue. A large, dark roast, no sugar. He said it was his way of looking after me since Margaret passed. I had felt grateful for it. Genuinely grateful in the way a man feels when he realizes his adult child has finally started paying attention. I turned the coffee cup in my hand and thought about Nathan. 38 years old, tall like me but thinner with Margaret's dark eyes and her way of tilting his head when he was listening or pretending to listen. He had been working inside Mercer Freight for 9 years, managing our regional contracts and vendor relationships. Smart enough, ambitious enough, sometimes too much. 2 years ago, he had pushed me hard to expand 12 new trucks, a federal contract bid that would have stretched our capital to the breaking point. I had said no. He had gone quiet after that. The kind of quiet that a father mistakes for maturity. The bell above Lou's front door jangled. A table of 4 near the window burst into laughter over something on someone's phone. Darlene shouted a carry-out order number toward the back. I reached for my water glass, and that was when I heard it. Footsteps from the kitchen side of the counter. Slow. Heavier than they should have been for someone that young. The kind of footsteps that carry extra weight not just in the body but somewhere deeper. I looked up without thinking about it. A young woman came through the swinging door from the kitchen, carrying a tray of water glasses. She wore the standard Lou's uniform dark slacks, a burgundy polo, a white apron tied twice around a belly that the apron could barely contain. Her dark hair was pulled back in a knot that was coming loose on one side. Her ankles were swollen above her non-slip shoes. She moved with the careful, deliberate effort of someone who had been on her feet for 8 hours and was determined not to show how much it hurt. She was 7 months pregnant. At least. I watched her set the water glasses down at the table beside mine without spilling a drop, her jaw set with concentration, her free hand hovering near her belly instinctively, even while the other hand worked. Then she turned slightly toward the light. My heart slammed against my ribs so hard I felt it in my throat. I knew that face. I knew the line of that jaw, the way her left eyebrow sat slightly higher than the right. The small scar above her lip from a bicycle accident she had told me about at Thanksgiving 3 years ago, the first Thanksgiving she had spent with our family, nervous and laughing too quickly at my jokes, holding Nathan's hand under the table like a lifeline. "Claire," I said. The word came out before I could stop it, barely above a whisper, barely loud enough to cross the 4 feet between us. But she heard it. Her head snapped toward me. For one suspended second, her eyes met mine, and in that second, I watched the color drain from her face the way water drains out of a bathtub, fast and complete. Then she turned and pushed back through the swinging kitchen door. I was out of my booth before my brain caught up with my legs. I pushed through the swinging door after her without a single thought about the fact that customers were not supposed to be back here, that I was 67 years old with a bad knee and a heart that had been behaving strangely for months, or that I had left a full glass of water and an unfinished order of meatloaf back at the corner booth, where Margaret and I used to argue about coffee. None of that mattered. The kitchen of Lou's diner hit me like a wall steam from the dishwasher, the sharp smell of fryer oil, the clang of pans, 2 line cooks shouting at each other over a ticket order. The fluorescent lights buzzed and flickered above a stainless steel counter, lined with plates waiting to go out. I spotted her immediately. Claire had made it as far as the dry storage alcove at the back of the kitchen, before her body simply would not carry her any further. She had her back pressed against a shelf of canned tomatoes, both hands wrapped around her belly, her chest heaving with short, panicked breaths. "Claire." I kept my voice low, the way you speak to someone standing on a ledge. "Look at me. It's Hal. Just Hal." She shook her head, pressing herself harder against the shelf. "You need to go back out front, Mr. Mercer. Please. I can't do this right now." "You're shaking," I said, because she was. Her whole body was trembling and not from cold. "I'm fine." Her voice cracked on the second word. "I'm fine, I just need you to go." "Claire." I took one step closer, slowly, hands open at my sides. I am not going anywhere, and I am not here to drag you back to Nathan. That stopped her. Her breathing was still ragged, but her eyes fixed on mine with an expression that was equal parts terror and desperate, exhausted hope. The look of someone who has been running so long they have forgotten what it feels like to stop. Mrs. Cho? I spoke the name without turning around, because I had felt the presence of someone else in the kitchen the moment I walked through the door. A woman stepped out from behind the prep station. She was 58 or so, Korean-American, compact and sure on her feet, in the way of someone who had owned this kitchen for decades. She looked at Claire, then at me with the calm assessment of a woman who has seen more complicated situations than most people ever will and has learned to read them fast. You her family? She asked me directly. Father-in-law? I said. She studied me for 3 full seconds. Then she untied her apron strings, hung the apron on its hook, and said, "Come with me." Her name was Linda Cho. She had owned Lou's Diner for 22 years. She led us through the back of the kitchen, past the industrial dishwasher and the walk-in cooler, down a short hallway that smelled of old cardboard and dried herbs, and pushed open a door I had never noticed before. The room was small enough that 3 people standing in it made it feel crowded. A folding cot against one wall made up neatly with a flannel blanket and a flat pillow. A milk crate turned upside down, serving as a nightstand with a water bottle, a phone charger, and a small tube of hand cream on top. A single hook on the wall holding a winter coat and a change of clothes in a plastic grocery bag. And on the pillow, a composition notebook with a worn cover. I stood in the doorway of that room for a long moment without moving. She came to me in the middle of November, Linda said from behind me, her voice matter-of-fact in the way of someone who has decided that facts are kinder than emotions right now. Knocked on the back door at 6 in the morning asking if I needed kitchen help. I could see she was pregnant. I asked her how far along. She said almost 7 months. Linda paused. She had been sleeping in her car for 3 weeks before that. The air went out of my lungs. In November, I said. My voice came out strange, flat and thin like a wire pulled too tight. In November, Linda confirmed. I gave her the storage room. I gave her the job. She works hard, never complains, never asks for anything she hasn't earned. She looked at Claire, not at me, when she said the next part. And she made me promise not to tell anyone she was here. Claire had settled herself onto the edge of the cot, one hand pressed to her lower back, the other resting on her belly. She would not look at me directly. She stared at a fixed point on the floor between us, her jaw tight, her eyes red but dry, a woman who had already spent all her tears a long time ago and had nothing left to cry with. Claire, I said. My voice broke in the middle of her name and I could not stop it. You slept in your car. In November. Pregnant. I was okay, she said quietly. The car had heat. That is not... I stopped. Started again. That is not what I'm saying, and you know it. She finally looked up at me. What do you want me to say, Mr. Mercer? That I should have done something different. Maybe I should have. But I didn't have anywhere to go that Nathan couldn't find. And I couldn't go back, and I couldn't... Her voice hitched one sharp, involuntary sound, and she pressed her lips together hard and breathed through her nose until she had it back under control. I couldn't risk him finding out about the baby. Not until I had enough. Enough what? I asked. She reached over and picked up the composition notebook from the pillow. She held it against her chest with both hands like it was the most valuable thing in the room, which I was beginning to understand it was. Enough to protect us both, she said. I looked at the notebook. Then I looked at her face, the shadows under her eyes, The deliberate steadiness she was holding herself to, the way she sat with her spine straight, despite the exhaustion that was written into every line of her body. Then I looked down. Tucked under the edge of the cot, barely visible in the dim light, was a pair of women's heels, cream-colored satin, the kind worn to a wedding. They were wrapped carefully in a clear plastic bag sealed at the top, set against the baseboard, as if someone had placed them there with intention. My throat tightened until I could barely swallow. Those were the shoes from her wedding to my son. She had been sleeping in a storage room behind a diner kitchen, 7 months pregnant, working 10-hour shifts on swollen feet, and she had carried those shoes with her through all of it. "Claire," I managed. "What did Nathan tell you when he made you leave?" Her chin lifted slightly. Her eyes met mine with a steadiness that cost her something. "He didn't tell me anything, Mr. Mercer," she said. "He just changed the locks while I was at a doctor's appointment. My key didn't work when I came home. There was a box of my things on the porch. A beat. And a note that said the marriage was over and I should not contact him or his family again." The fluorescent light above us flickered once. Somewhere in the kitchen behind us, a timer went off, and nobody silenced it. "He told me you left," I said. "He told all of us you left voluntarily, that there was another man." Claire did not react with outrage or shock. She only nodded slowly, as though she had already run this conversation in her mind 100 times. "I know what he told you," she said, "and I know you believed him." She paused. "I don't blame you for that, Mr. Mercer. He's very good at it." She opened the composition notebook to the first page and held it out toward me. But I need you to know," she said, "that I have been writing down everything. Every date, every amount, every name." Her finger pressed against the first line of careful small handwriting. "Because I knew that someday someone was going to need to read it." Linda Cho pulled the storage room door shut behind her as she left, and the sounds of the kitchen faded to a low, muffled hum through the thin wall. The fluorescent tube above us buzzed steadily. Claire sat on the edge of the cot with the composition notebook held against her chest, and I dragged the single plastic chair from the corner and sat down facing her close enough that our knees were almost touching. "Start from the beginning," I said. "Not for me, for yourself. Say it out loud to someone who is actually listening." Claire pressed her lips together. Her chin trembled once violently, and then she locked it down with the kind of jaw-clenching effort that told me she had been doing exactly that, locking things down for a very long time. "It didn't happen all at once," she began. Her voice was low and careful, like she was carrying something fragile. "That's the part that's hardest to explain to people. You don't wake up one morning and realize your husband has turned into someone you don't recognize. It happens in pieces, little pieces, so small that every time you notice one, you tell yourself you're being crazy." "What was the first piece?" I asked. "One, the health insurance," she said. "August. I went to my OB appointment, and the receptionist told me my coverage had been terminated. I thought it was a billing error." She opened the notebook to a dog-eared page and turned it toward me. Her handwriting was small and precise, dates running down the left margin like a ledger. "I called the insurance company from the parking lot. They told me I had been removed from the policy in May, 3 months earlier." Nathan never said a word. My stomach dropped. "He removed you from the insurance while you were pregnant." "While I was 11 weeks pregnant," she said. "Yes." She turned another page. "September, he removed my name from the lease on the house. I found out when the landlord called to confirm a change of occupancy. October, he canceled the joint checking account and opened a new one in his name only. November 1st, he changed the emergency contact listed for me at his office from my name to hers. On hers, I repeated. The word felt like touching a hot stove. Diana. Claire nodded. Diana Cole. She started coming around about 8 months ago. Nathan introduced her as a vendor contact, a sales rep for one of your freight partners. She paused. But she wasn't there for the freight business, Mr. Mercer. She was there for the business of getting rid of me. How long before you understood that? About 3 weeks after she started coming to the house for dinner. Claire's voice hardened slightly at the edges. She sat at my kitchen table and ate the food I cooked and talked to Nathan like I was the guest, and she was the one who belonged there. And Nathan let her. He laughed at her jokes. He refilled her glass. He forgot my name twice in the same evening and corrected himself like it was nothing. My hands gripped the sides of the plastic chair hard enough that I felt the cheap plastic flecks under my fingers. Claire, I'm not finished, she said. Not harshly, but firmly. The night Nathan changed the locks, I had been at my prenatal appointment. 26 weeks. The baby was healthy. I remember the doctor showing me the heartbeat on the screen, and I was so relieved that I bought myself a cup of tea from the machine in the lobby just to celebrate a little. Her voice dropped. I came home and my key didn't work. I stood on the porch for 10 minutes trying the key over and over because my brain wouldn't accept what was happening. There was a cardboard box next to the door. Some clothes. My mother's recipe book. A photograph of my parents from their wedding. She stopped, breathed. No note. Nathan told you there was a note. There wasn't. Something hot and furious moved through my chest. He told me you left, I said, and my voice came out rough and shaking in a way I had not expected. He sat across from me at my own kitchen table and he cried, Claire. He actually cried. He told me you had been seeing someone else for months, and you took money from the joint account, and you were gone. Claire looked at me steadily. Her eyes were dry, but her hands wrapped around the notebook had gone white at the knuckles. How much did he say I took? $11,000. She laughed a short, sharp sound that had no humor in it. There was $412 in that account when he closed it, Mr. Mercer. I have the screenshot. She flipped to the back of the notebook and showed me a folded printout tucked into the inside cover. I took nothing. I had nothing to take. I put my elbows on my knees and pressed both hands over my face. My eyes burned. My throat ached the way it had not ached since the morning after Margaret's funeral, when I sat alone in her kitchen and could not remember how to make coffee. I believed him, I said into my palms. God help me, I believed every word he said. I know you did. Her voice was not accusatory. It was something worse. It was understanding. He's your son. Of course you believed him. I dragged my hands down my face and looked at her. Why didn't you come to me? Why didn't you call me directly? Claire set the notebook down on her knee. Her expression shifted, something complicated moving behind her eyes, equal parts grief and hesitation. I did, she said quietly. I tried. 3 times in August I drove to your house, Mr. Mercer. 3 times. She exhaled slowly. Every time Nathan answered the door. He told me you were resting, that you weren't feeling well, that it wasn't a good time. She held my gaze. And then he said something that scared me badly enough that I stopped trying. I sat very still. What did he say? She reached into the front pocket of her apron and pulled out a folded piece of paper, worn soft at the creases, as if it had been unfolded and refolded many times. She held it out to me. He slipped this under the windshield of my car after the 3rd visit, she said. Read it. I unfolded the paper. The handwriting was Nathan's. I would have known it anywhere. If you come back here again, I will tell my father you threatened me. I will have you assessed. Nobody will believe a woman with a history of emotional instability. You will lose the baby. Walk away now, and at least you keep that." The paper shook in my hand. Not because my hand was trembling from the medication, because I was shaking with a rage so cold and clean it felt like standing in a February wind with no coat on. "Claire," I said. My voice had dropped to something I barely recognized. "There is one more thing I need you to tell me. You said earlier tonight that what you had to say was about my health." I looked up from the note. "Tell me what you meant." She held my gaze. Her chin was steady now. Her voice when it came was quiet and absolutely certain. "Your coffee, Mr. Mercer," she said. "The coffee Nathan brings you every morning." She pressed her hand flat against the open notebook page. "We need to talk about what's in it." The storage room felt smaller than it had 5 minutes ago. I folded Nathan's note carefully and set it on top of the composition notebook in my lap. My hands were not shaking from the medication now. They were shaking from something else entirely, a cold, grinding recognition that had been working its way up from my gut since the moment Claire said the word coffee. "Tell me everything," I said. "Don't soften it." Claire leaned forward on the cot, both elbows on her knees, and looked at me the way a person looks at someone they are about to hurt on purpose because the alternative is worse. "Diana has a cousin who works at a pharmacy over in Westerville. His name doesn't matter. What matters is that she knows enough about medications to be dangerous." She paused. "Amlodipine. Do you know what that is?" "My blood pressure medication," I said. "Dr. Patterson put me on it 18 months ago." "Right. 5 milligrams once a day. That's the normal therapeutic dose." Claire's voice was steady and precise, the voice of a woman who had rehearsed this conversation many times in the dark. "In higher doses, say 15 or 20 milligrams, amlodipine causes severe dizziness, fatigue that no amount of sleep fixes, hand tremors, confusion. Especially in men your age, it can look exactly like natural decline. Exactly like a 67-year-old man whose body is starting to give out." She let that land. "Nathan has been dissolving extra tablets into your coffee every morning, Mr. Mercer. I watched Diana hand him the pills in a small plastic bag the second week of September. I wrote the date down." She opened the notebook and pointed to the entry. "September 14th. N received PKG from DC kitchen counter, small zip bag white tablets crushed. That was the same week your dizzy spells started getting worse, wasn't it?" The bottom dropped out of my stomach. I thought about every morning for the past 10 weeks. Nathan arriving with the large, dark roast from Rosie's Roast, setting it on my kitchen counter with a smile. "Drink up, Dad, you need the energy." Me wrapping both hands around the warm cup and feeling grateful, genuinely, completely grateful that my son was paying attention. "Lord Almighty," I said. The words came out barely above a breath. "I know." Claire's voice tightened. "I know, and I'm so sorry I didn't find a way to tell you sooner. I tried to figure out how to get to you without Nathan knowing. Every option I came up with, calling, writing, showing up, he had already closed off." I stood up from the plastic chair because I could not sit still anymore. The storage room was too small to pace in, but I tried anyway, 2 steps toward the door and 2 steps back, my hand pressed flat against my sternum where my heart was hammering at a rate that Dr. Patterson would not have approved of. "How long have you known?" I demanded. "Since the end of September," she said. 6 weeks after I saw Diana hand him the bag. 6 weeks. I stopped moving and looked at her. "Claire, you've known for 6 weeks that someone was poisoning me, and I've spent those 6 weeks building a case that will actually hold up." She said, her voice rising slightly for the first time, not in anger, but in urgency. "Mr. Mercer, If I had called the police in September with nothing but what I saw from across a kitchen, what would have happened? Nathan would have said I was lying. Diana would have said the same. And you. She stopped herself. And I would have believed them. I finished. She held my gaze without flinching. Yes, I put my back against the shelving unit and let it take some of my weight. The canned goods pressed cold through my shirt. I thought about the morning 2 weeks ago when I had gripped the bathroom sink for 3 full minutes, waiting for the room to stop spinning, convinced I was about to have a stroke. I had not told anyone. I had been too proud. "Tell me about Margaret," I said suddenly. "Tell me about why you stayed." Something shifted in Claire's face, a softening that moved through her like a wave and left her looking for just a moment, like the young woman Nathan had brought home to Sunday dinner 4 years ago. The one who had laughed too quickly at my jokes and squeezed Nathan's hand under the table. "2 years into the marriage, things got bad between us," she said. "Not what they are now, just bad. Nathan was pulling away. I didn't understand why. I had already decided it was over." She looked at the notebook in her lap. "I wrote the divorce papers myself. I had them in my purse. I drove to your house one Sunday afternoon, intending to tell your wife I was leaving." Her voice softened further. "But when I got there, Margaret took one look at my face and sat me down in her kitchen and made tea. And she told me about you, about the year you worked 7 days a week and forgot her birthday and missed her surgery because of a freight contract in Cleveland." My throat closed. "She told me she had written divorce papers too," Claire continued. 32 years ago. She told me she tore them up in that same kitchen at that same table." A faint, heartbroken smile crossed Claire's face. She said, "A good man can get lost, honey, but a good woman knows the way home." And I believed her. The smile faded. "I tore up my papers that afternoon, Mr. Mercer, right there in Margaret's kitchen, and I went home and I tried harder." I could not speak. "She saved my marriage," Claire said quietly. "And Nathan repaid that by turning it into something she never could have imagined." I pressed my fingers hard against my eyes and held them there. My chest ached with the specific punishing grief of a man who has just understood that the woman he loved had tried to hold everything together from the beyond, and that her kindness had unknowingly kept someone he loved in harm's way. Margaret saw something worth saving. I finally said, my voice rough and unsteady. "She was right about that, Claire. She was wrong about Nathan. But she was right about you." Claire's eyes finally filled, not spilling over, just filling, shining under the fluorescent light. "What do we do now, Mr. Mercer?" she asked. I straightened up from the shelving unit. The cold from the cans was gone. Something else had replaced it, something that felt for the first time in months like clarity. "First," I said, "you stop calling me Mr. Mercer. It's Hal." I picked up the composition notebook from her hands and held it carefully. "Second, tomorrow morning, when Nathan shows up at my door with that coffee, I am going to smile and say thank you." I met her eyes. "And then I am going to find out exactly what he has been putting in it." I drove Claire to the Fairfield Inn on Airport Drive at 11:30 that night. I booked the room under Roy's name, Roy Casper, my driver of 14 years, paid cash at the front desk, and told the night clerk it was a family situation. The clerk did not ask follow-up questions. People rarely do when a 67-year-old man pays cash and looks like he has been crying in a parking lot, which I had been briefly on the way over. I waited until Claire's room light came on before I pulled out of the lot. The drive home took 22 minutes. I know because I counted traffic lights the whole way. Something Margaret used to tease me about, said I turned everything into a project when I was scared. She was right. 12 lights between the Fairfield Inn and the house on Elmwood Drive. I hit 9 of them red. The house was dark when I pulled into the driveway. I had left without turning on the porch light, which I never did. Margaret had always turned on the porch light. 3 years since she passed, and I still walked into a dark house every single night and felt the specific hollow surprise of it every single time. I did not go to bed. I walked through the kitchen, did not touch the coffee maker, did not touch the bag of grounds Nathan had left on the counter 2 days ago, and went straight down the hall to Nathan's old bedroom. I had not changed it much since he moved out. A desk, a bookshelf, a closet full of things he had decided he did not need when he upgraded to a penthouse apartment downtown. I had kept it all. Fathers do that. We keep the evidence of who our children used to be long after our children have moved on to becoming someone else. I sat down at the desk and opened the top drawer. Rubber bands. A broken calculator. 2 pens that did not work. A Columbus Clippers schedule from 2019. I opened the second drawer. Old owner's manuals. A phone charger that fit nothing manufactured after 2015. I opened the bottom drawer, the deep one, the one that always stuck slightly on the left side, and had to put both hands on the handle and pull hard before it gave. Inside was a cardboard shoebox I recognized immediately. Nathan's school things. Report cards, a spelling bee ribbon from 4th grade, a photograph of him, at 8 years old, sitting on the hood of my first freight truck, with his arms spread wide and his mouth open in the biggest grin I had ever seen on a child's face. I set the photograph aside without letting myself look at it too long. Beneath it, I found what I had not known I was looking for until my fingers touched it, a plain white envelope unsealed, slightly crumpled, as though it had been handled many times, and then tucked away. No name on the front. I turned it over. Inside was a piece of paper folded in thirds, and tucked against it, a smaller square of glossy paper, the kind printed from a drugstore photo kiosk. I unfolded the smaller paper first. It was a sonogram image. The kind they print out at the 12-week appointment, black and white and grainy with a tiny curved shape at the center that your brain has to work to recognize as a person. In the lower right corner, printed in small clinical type, Sutton C. 12 weeks, 2 days. July 18th, 2024. My grandson. 12 weeks old in this photograph, which meant the image was taken 4 months before I knew he existed. My hand was trembling so badly that the sonogram image rattled between my fingers. I set it flat on the desk and pressed my palm over it to make it stop. Then I unfolded the letter. Claire's handwriting, the same small, careful script from the composition notebook. The paper was soft from folding and refolding, the creases worn almost through in 2 places. Dear Mr. Mercer, I have driven to your house 3 times in the past month. Each time Nathan answered the door before I could ring the bell. He told me you were resting and not well enough for visitors. The first time I believed him. The second time I was not sure. The third time I sat in my car at the end of your driveway for 20 minutes before he came outside and told me you had asked not to be disturbed. I want you to know about the baby. I want you to know that you are going to be a grandfather. I have wanted to tell you since July, but I could not find a way to get to you that Nathan did not control. I am sorry I was not strong enough to push past him. I am sorry I let him convince me that you would not believe me. I should have tried harder. His name is going to be Lucas. I decided that last week. I thought you should know that too. Claire. Below her name in pencil lighter ink, added later the letters slightly less steady. I left this letter in Nathan's desk by accident when I came to get my winter coat after he changed the locks. I don't know if he found it. I don't know if it matters anymore, but I couldn't throw it away. I sat at Nathan's old desk in the dark bedroom and held that letter in both hands. 3 times. She had driven to this house 3 times to tell me about Lucas. 3 times my son had stood at his own father's front door and turned her away with a lie he's resting. He's not feeling well, he asked not to be disturbed, while I sat 20 feet away in the living room, watching the evening news and eating a TV dinner and telling myself I was doing fine. The burning behind my eyes built until it became impossible to blink back. I pressed the letter flat against my chest and sat in my dead son's old bedroom in the dark and let it happen. I do not know how long I sat there. What I know is that when I finally stood up, my knees ached and my back was stiff, and the bedroom window had gone from black to the deep gray that comes just before dawn. I tucked the sonogram image and the letter into the inside pocket of my jacket next to my chest. Then I walked to the kitchen window and looked out at the driveway. A pair of headlights swept across the garage door as a car turned slowly onto Elmwood Drive. Nathan's car. He was early this morning. The headlights died in the driveway, and I heard the familiar sound of Nathan's car door, the particular soft thunk of the German engineering he had spent $42,000 on 3 years ago, a purchase that had made him beam with pride in a way that nothing at Mercer Freight ever quite managed. I moved away from the kitchen window and sat down at the table. I folded my hands on the tabletop. I made sure they were steady before the back door opened. Dad. Nathan's voice came first, then the rest of him, tall, dark coat, a paper cup holder from Rosie's Roast, balanced in one hand with 2 large coffees, which was new. He usually only brought 1. "You're up early. I saw the kitchen light on when I pulled in." "Couldn't sleep," I said. "Old man problems." He set the coffees on the counter and shrugged off his coat with the easy, unhurried movements of a man who believes the morning belongs to him. He was wearing a gray Henley and dark jeans hair still damp from the shower. He looked rested. He looked comfortable. He looked like a man without a single weight on his conscience, and the sight of it hit me somewhere deep and vicious that I kept carefully off my face. I brought 2 today," he said, setting 1 cup in front of me. "Thought we could sit together for once. You eat anything this morning?" "Not yet," I said. I wrapped both hands around the cup, felt the warmth of it. "This is enough for now." Nathan pulled out the chair across from me and sat down, stretching his long legs under the table the way he had done since he was 15 years old. He picked up his own cup and leaned back. "You look tired," he said, studying me with an expression of careful concern. "More than usual. Those dizzy spells come back yesterday." "Little bit, chum," I said. "Morning's the worst time." He nodded slowly, as though this confirmed something he had already suspected. "I've been thinking, Dad. Maybe it's time to talk about bringing someone in. You know, a home health aide. Just a few hours a day help you keep on top of the medication schedule, make sure you're eating right." He tilted his head slightly, the way Margaret used to tilt her head, and the resemblance twisted the knife. "I worry about you being out here alone." "I appreciate that, son," I said. I raised the coffee cup to my lips. I did not drink. I set it back down and ran my thumb along the plastic lid as though testing whether it was sealed properly, buying myself 3 seconds of natural-looking delay. "Actually, you know what, my stomach's a little unsettled this morning. I might wait on the coffee." Something moved across Nathan's face, too quick and too small for most people to catch. A flicker. There and gone. "Sure," he said easily. "No rush." We talked for 20 minutes about nothing that mattered. A contract renewal coming up in January. Whether the furnace needed servicing before the hard cold hit. Whether I had called the gutter company yet about the back of the house. Normal conversation. The kind fathers and sons have on Saturday mornings all across Ohio. I watched him the entire time. I watched the way he kept glancing at my coffee cup. I watched the way his shoulders held a faint, constant tension that had nothing to do with the topics we were discussing. I watched his eyes track the cup every time I shifted in my chair, the same way a man watches a card he has placed face down on a table, checking without appearing to check that it has not been turned over. After the furnace and the gutters, there was a brief lull. Nathan drained the last of his own coffee and stood carrying the empty cup to the trash. "I should get going," he said. "Got some things to sort out this weekend." He paused at the counter and nodded toward my untouched cup. "You sure you don't want that before it gets cold? I had them make it the way you like." "Leave it for later," I said. "I'll heat it up." He studied me for just a half-second longer than was natural. "Okay, Dad," he said. "Call me if the dizziness gets bad." "I always do," I said. He pulled on his coat. He picked up his keys from the counter. He walked to the back door, opened it, and paused with one hand on the frame. "Love you, Dad," he said. 38 years of hearing those 3 words from my son's mouth. This was the first time they made my stomach turn. "Drive safe," I said. The door clicked shut. I sat at the kitchen table and looked at the coffee cup in front of me for a long moment. Then I stood up, opened the cabinet under the sink, and found a clean Ziploc bag left over from last summer's fishing trip. I sealed the coffee cup inside it, carefully pressing out the air, and set it on the counter. Then I picked up my phone and scrolled to a number I had not called in 8 years, Dr. James Howell. We had been in the same bowling league back when Margaret was alive. He was a quiet, precise man who did not gossip and did not panic, which was exactly what I needed right now. He picked up on the 3rd ring. "James," I said. "It's Hal Mercer. I need to see you today. Not at the clinic, somewhere private." I looked at the sealed bag on the counter. "And I need you to test something for me. There is a part of Columbus that the city's tourism brochures do not feature the Eastern Industrial Corridor off Livingston Avenue, where the buildings are low and flat and stained with 30 years of exhaust, and the parking lots are cracked asphalt held together by optimism and old paint. Mercer Freight had started in a building 2 blocks from here. I had not been back to this part of town in 6 years, maybe 7. Frank Delgado's auto shop occupied the end unit of a cinder-block strip on Kelton Avenue. A hand-painted sign above the roll-up door read, "Delgado's Service and Repair All Makes Welcome." One of the letters in welcome had faded to near invisibility. The door was up, and I could hear the pneumatic wheeze of an air wrench from somewhere inside before I even got out of the truck. I stood at the entrance for a moment. 10 years was a long time. Frank had been my warehouse operations manager for 11 years, the kind of employee who showed up before anyone else and left after everyone else, and never once asked for recognition because he was too busy making sure the work got done right. When a competitor approached me with evidence that someone inside Mercer Freight had been leaking our contract bids, 3 people had access to the information. 2 of them had been with me since the beginning. Frank was the newest of the 3. I had chosen wrong. I had let a lawyer convince me that the evidence pointed at Frank, and I had called him into my office on a Tuesday morning and handed him a termination letter without asking a single question. He had looked at me across the desk and said very quietly, "I didn't do this, Mr. Mercer." And I had said, "I'm sorry, Frank." And then I had let him walk out the door. I had told myself for 10 years that I had not had a choice. Standing outside his shop on a cold Saturday morning with a Ziploc bag in my jacket pocket and my dead wife's voice in my head saying a good man can get lost, I understood that I had simply chosen not to look harder for one. I walked inside. Frank was on a creeper under a Ford F-150, visible only from the knees down. Work boots, dark canvas pants, a strip of bare wrist catching the shop light as he reached for something. The air smelled of motor oil and cold concrete and the faint chemical sweetness of brake cleaner. "Shop's full up today," he said from under the truck, not looking. "Leave your number on the clipboard by the door." "Frank," I said. The creeper wheels scraped against the concrete as he rolled himself out from under the truck. Frank Delgado, at 63, looked like a man who had carried heavy things for a long time and had made peace with the weight of them. His hair had gone silver at the temples. His face was lined in the way of someone who spent a lot of time outdoors. He looked at me without expression, a socket wrench loose in one grease-darkened hand, and for a long moment, neither of us said anything that could be called comfortable. "Mr. Mercer," he said finally. "Not warm, not cold, just factual. See, I owe you an apology that's 10 years overdue," I said. "And I need your help. In that order, if you'll give me 5 minutes." He studied me the way a man studies a used engine looking for the thing that's been covered up rather than fixed. Then he set the socket wrench on his rolling toolbox and wiped his hands on a shop rag. "5 minutes," he said. "Office is in the back." The office was a converted storage room with a metal desk, 2 mismatched chairs, and a coffee maker that looked older than either of us. Frank did not offer coffee. He sat behind the desk and folded his hands and waited. "I was wrong about you," I said. "In 2014, the bid leak, I had 3 people with access, and I picked you because you were the newest. I told myself the evidence pointed at you. The truth is, I didn't investigate hard enough to know where it actually pointed, and I let a lawyer push me toward the fastest answer." I held his gaze. "You told me you didn't do it. I didn't ask you a single question after that. That was wrong, Frank. It cost you 11 years of your career, and I have no excuse for it." Frank looked at me for a long time. "That apology," he said slowly, "is about 8 years past when it would have changed anything significant in my life." He exhaled through his nose. "But I appreciate you saying it to my face instead of through a lawyer." "That's fair," I said. He reached into the top drawer of his desk, without looking away from me, as though he had been rehearsing this moment in his mind for longer than I realized. He set a USB drive on the metal surface between us. Black standard size, the kind you buy in a 3-pack at Walgreens. "I've been waiting to know how to get this to you for several months," he said. I looked at the drive. "What's on it?" "My buddy Ray works accounting for a small freight outfit over in Lancaster," Frank said. "About 8 months ago, Nathan approached their owner about buying the company. During the due diligence process, Ray noticed some of the incoming wire transfers didn't match up with any legitimate Mercer freight vendor invoices. He pulled the transaction records before the deal fell through." Frank pushed the drive across the desk with one finger. 14 transfers, 18 months. The money came out of Mercer Freight operating accounts and landed in 3 LLCs that Ray could not connect to any real business activity. My jaw tightened. "How much?" Ray counted $1.2 million. The number sat between us like something physical. "Frank." My voice came out rougher than I intended. "Why didn't you take this to the police yourself?" He leaned back in his chair and crossed his arms. "Because without you filing a complaint as the company owner, there's no crime to investigate. Ray's records prove money moved. They don't prove theft without the owner saying it was unauthorized." He held my gaze steadily. "And because I wanted you to have it first. After what happened between us, I figured you deserved to know before the whole thing went public." I picked up the USB drive and closed my fist around it. "Frank," I said, "I owe you more than an apology." He shook his head once firmly. "Don't. Not today." He stood and picked up his shop rag again. "Go do what you need to do, Mr. Mercer. We can talk about the rest of it after. I stood and extended my hand. He shook it brief, firm, the handshake of a man who has decided to let something go without pretending it was nothing. I walked back out through the shop into the cold November air, the USB drive in my pocket, alongside the Ziploc bag. Two small objects. Between them enough to bring down everything Nathan had built on top of my life. I had one more stop before nightfall. We are halfway through Hal's story, and the hardest part is still ahead. Before Dr. Howell opens that folder and tells me what my own blood is carrying, drop a comment. Tell me what you think he is going to find. I want to know if you saw this coming before I did. Note some elements of this story have been shaped for storytelling purposes. Names and details are coincidental, but the lesson in what follows is something worth staying for. Dr. James Howell's private practice was not the kind of place that appeared in any insurance network directory. It was a converted Victorian on Bryden Road, white clapboard green shutters, a small brass plate beside the door that read simply, J. Howell, M.D. James, had been practicing internal medicine in Columbus for 26 years. He was 55, lean and precise in the way of a man who ran 6 miles every morning, not for health, but for the thinking time. And he had the unhurried manner of someone who had learned long ago that rushing a diagnosis cost more than taking it slowly. He met me at the side entrance rather than the front, his suggestion made without my asking, which told me he had already understood from my phone call that this was not a situation for waiting rooms and clipboards. "You look like you haven't slept," he said, holding the door. "I haven't," I said. "Not really." His examination room smelled of rubbing alcohol and old wood and the faint cedar of whatever soap he used. He closed the door, pulled on examination gloves, and held out his hand for the Ziploc bag without asking me to explain it again. "Tell me about the timeline," he said, setting the bag under the light and examining the sealed cup through the plastic. 10 weeks, I said. The dizziness started getting bad the 3rd week of September, worst in the mornings, usually an hour or so after coffee. I thought it was the blood pressure medication interacting with age. I watched him work. My daughter-in-law told me last night that my son has been dissolving extra blood pressure tablets into my coffee. Amlodipine. She said high doses. James did not react dramatically. He simply looked up from the bag and held my eyes for 2 full seconds, reading something in my face, then looked back down. "Roll up your sleeve," he said. He drew blood efficiently, and without unnecessary commentary, 3 vials, the needle cold and precise in the crook of my elbow. While the centrifuge ran in the adjacent room, he tested a sample from the coffee cup with a portable analysis kit, the kind kept in a locked cabinet that most general practitioners never need to open. I sat on the examination table and looked at the framed photograph on the wall across from me. A fishing trip somewhere northern James and 3 other men holding up walleye on a dock, all of them laughing. Margaret had taken a photograph almost identical to that one of me and 2 friends at Lake Erie in 1998. I had not been fishing since she passed. "Hal," James's voice came from the doorway of the adjacent room. I looked up. His expression had not changed. He was too experienced to let his face do his talking for him, but something in the set of his shoulders had shifted in the way that things shift when a careful man has confirmed something he was hoping to be wrong about. The coffee sample shows amlodipine concentration consistent with approximately 15 to 20 milligrams dissolved, he said. He came back into the room and sat on the rolling stool, his hands clasped between his knees. "Your prescribed dose is 5 milligrams once daily. 15 to 20 milligrams in a single morning dose in a man your age with your existing cardiovascular profile would produce exactly the symptoms you've been experiencing. Dizziness, fatigue, hand tremors, cognitive fogginess." He paused. Taken consistently over 10 weeks, it would also begin stressing your kidneys and causing the kind of blood pressure instability that looks on a routine checkup like natural age-related decline. The examination room was very quiet. Outside, a car passed on Bryden Road. A dog barked once, 2 houses down, and stopped. "How bad is it?" I asked. "The damage so far?" "Your blood work will tell me more precisely, but based on your symptoms and the concentration in that sample." He chose his next words carefully. "You need to stop exposure immediately, which I assume you have already done." "Since last night," I said. He nodded. "I'm going to start you on a protocol to help your kidneys clear the excess. It will take several weeks." He looked at me directly. "Hal, what you are describing is deliberate sustained poisoning. You understand that I have reporting obligations." "I know," I said. "I'm not asking you to bury it, James. I'm asking you to document everything precisely and give me 72 hours before anything gets filed officially. I have evidence I need to organize first." He studied me for a long moment. 72 hours, he said. "Not because I'm comfortable with it, because I trust that you know what you're doing." "I'm not sure I do," I said honestly, "but I know what needs to happen." He printed the preliminary results and handed me the folder. My name at the top, the numbers below it. Numbers that turned 10 weeks of Nathan's careful morning visits into something that had a legal name and a prison sentence attached to it. I folded the folder and tucked it inside my jacket alongside the sonogram and the letter. My phone buzzed on the table beside me. A text from Claire. "He just drove past the hotel twice. I saw his car from the window. He doesn't know which room, but he knows I'm nearby." My chest clenched hard enough that I had to breathe through it deliberately. I typed back, "Stay in the room. Lock the deadbolt and the chain. I'm on my way." James walked me to the side door. He put one hand briefly on my shoulder, the gesture of a man who understood that there was nothing useful left to say. "Be careful, Hal," he said. "I'm working on it," I said. I drove home from Bryden Road, the long way down Broad Street, instead of the highway, past the old Mercer Freight Depot on Livingston, past the church where Margaret and I got married in 1981, past the elementary school where Nathan won the 4th grade spelling bee, and I had stood in the back of the gymnasium with my chest so full of pride I could barely breathe. I was looking for the thread, the moment that connected the 8-year-old grinning on the hood of my freight truck to the man who had been dissolving pills into his father's coffee for 10 weeks. I did not find it on Broad Street. I parked in the driveway and sat in the truck for a few minutes, hands on the wheel listening to the engine tick as it cooled. The porch light was dark. I had still not learned to turn it on before I left. Inside, I went straight to Nathan's old bedroom and sat down at the desk. I opened the bottom drawer, the one that stuck on the left side, and reached past the shoebox until my fingers found what I was looking for. A folded piece of paper I had noticed last night, but had set aside because I had not been ready for it yet. I unfolded it on the desk under the lamp, Nathan's handwriting. 19 years old by the date in the corner, his first semester at Ohio State before he dropped out to come work with me. The letters were careful and slightly stiff, the way handwriting looks when someone is trying to write neatly because the thing they are writing matters to them. "Dad, I want to be just like you. A man who builds things that last." 9 words. I had found this note in a birthday card he had given me 20 years ago and saved it in the drawer because Margaret said I should, that someday I would want it, that fathers needed to hold onto proof of the moments their children chose them. She had been right in a way she had not intended. I set the note on the desk and opened the other drawer, the one I used for current paperwork, and found the folder Dr. Howell had given me an hour ago. I laid it open beside the note. My name at the top of the medical report. Nathan's name on the beneficiary amendment attached to the back. $15 million, payable upon my death. Filed 6 weeks ago, the same week the dizziness got bad enough that I had started holding the bathroom sink in the mornings. Same desk, same drawer. 9 words from a 19-year-old boy who wanted to be like his father. And a document from a 38-year-old man betting $15 million on his father's death. I pressed both palms flat on the desk and looked at the 2 pieces of paper until my eyes ached. "When did I lose you?" I said out loud to the empty room. The room did not answer. I reached under the desk and pulled out the box Margaret had kept on the bottom shelf of her closet, the one I had moved here after she passed, because I could not bring myself to open it and could not bring myself to throw it away. Inside were the things she had considered important enough to save. Report cards, Christmas cards, a napkin from our first date with her lipstick on the edge of it, which she had kept for 39 years without telling me, and at the bottom, wrapped in a kitchen towel, her old phone. I plugged it into the charger I still kept on Nathan's desk, never touched, always there, as though some part of me knew I would need it eventually. The screen stayed dark for 2 minutes. Then the apple appeared. I sat and watched the battery percentage climb from 3 to 7, 8, 9. At 11%, the screen came to life with Margaret's wallpaper, a photograph of the 3 of us at Put-in Bay the summer Nathan turned 16. Nathan was sunburned and laughing. Margaret had her arm around his shoulders. I was squinting at the camera because I had always hated having my picture taken, and Margaret had always taken them anyway. I opened the video folder. There were 47 videos. Birthday parties, holidays, a video of the backyard after the big snowstorm in 2019 that she had narrated like a nature documentary, complete with impressions of the squirrels. I watched 30 seconds of that one and had to stop because the sound of her voice hit me somewhere I was not prepared for. I kept scrolling. Near the bottom, filed under the date 4 years ago, a Sunday in March, I found a video labeled in her photo, caption, "N brings Claire for dinner, finally." I pressed play. The footage was shaky at first, Margaret getting the angle right the way she always did, one hand on the doorframe. Then it steadied. The front hallway of our house, the front door opening. Nathan stepped inside first, and the look on his face stopped me cold. He was terrified. Not of me. I could see me in the background of the shot coming down the hallway, wiping my hands on a dish towel. He was terrified of getting this wrong. His shoulders were hunched slightly, his jaw set, and he was turning to look back at the door with the expression of a man who has done something that matters enormously to him and cannot quite believe it is actually happening. Claire came in behind him. She was 23 in this video, younger than I remembered, and she was holding a bunch of grocery store tulips in both hands, the way a person holds something when they do not know what else to do with their hands. She looked at our house, at the framed photographs on the hallway wall, at the coat rack, at the braided rug Margaret had bought at a church sale, with an expression of such careful, earnest attention that it was almost painful to watch. Nathan reached back and took her hand. His hand was shaking. I had forgotten that detail. I had been in the kitchen when they arrived, had only seen them from the hallway. I had not seen his hand shaking. Then Margaret's voice came from behind the camera, warm and slightly too loud, the way she always was when she was moved by something and trying to hide it. "Hal, come look. Come see. He's nervous as a long-tailed cat." And in the video, Nathan heard her and turned his head, and the look on his face when he saw her filming was equal parts exasperation and helpless, uncomplicated love. "Mom," he said. "Put the phone down." "I will not," she said. "This is the most important thing that has happened in this house since you came home from the hospital." Claire laughed, surprise genuine. and Nathan's face broke into a grin that I had not seen on him in years. I stopped the video. I sat at the desk for a long time with my hands in my lap, and Margaret's phone face down in front of me, and Nathan's 9-word note and Dr. Howell's folder side by side under the lamp. I was not looking for the thread anymore. I had found it. The thread had been cut from the inside, and the only question left that mattered was what I was going to build from what remained. I picked up my phone and called Eddie Cross. Eddie Cross did not sound surprised to hear from me at 9 o'clock on a Saturday night, which told me either that he kept unusual hours or that people only called him when things had already gone sideways. Probably both. We had worked together once before 8 years ago during a contract dispute with a vendor who turned out to be running 3 companies simultaneously under different names. Eddie had found the 3rd company in 4 days. I had paid him well and kept his number. I need surveillance on 2 people starting tomorrow morning, I told him. My son Nathan Mercer and a woman named Diana Cole. I want to know where they go, who they meet, and whether either of them goes near the Fairfield Inn on Airport Drive. Timeline, he said. 72 hours to start. Rates the same as last time. Fine, I said. I'll have your retainer transferred in the morning. I hung up and went to bed, which was not the same thing as sleeping. Sunday morning arrived gray and cold, the kind of Ohio November sky that looks like it has given up on the concept of sunlight. I was showered and dressed by 7 at Paula Hines' office by 8:30. Paula had been a forensic accountant in Columbus for 19 years. I had hired her firm for an internal audit 5 years back. She had found $60,000 in duplicate vendor payments inside of a week and presented the findings with the calm efficiency of someone reporting the weather. She was 45, direct in the way of a person who dealt exclusively in numbers and had long since run out of patience for anything that couldn't be verified. She met me at the door of her office building on North High Street, coffee in hand, and held the door without saying good morning. I appreciated that. USB first, she said, sitting behind her desk. Walk me through what you know while I pull the files. I set the USB from Frank Clare's composition notebook and Dr. Howell's folder on her desk. I talked. She listened without looking up, her fingers moving over the keyboard with the fast, precise rhythm of someone who had been doing this long enough that the typing was automatic. For 20 minutes, the only sounds in the room were my voice and her keyboard, and the occasional ping of her second monitor flagging something for review. Then she stopped typing. "Hal," she said. "Come look at this." I came around the desk and looked at her screen. She had the 14 wire transfers lined up in a spreadsheet: dates, amounts, destination, account numbers. Each transfer had gone to one of 3 LLC accounts. She had pulled the LLC registration records from the Ohio Secretary of State database. "These 3 LLCs," she said, pointing with her pen, "registered within a 6-week window 18 months ago. Registered agent is listed as a woman named Sandra Cole." "Cole," I said. "In Diana Cole's mother," Paula said. "Sandra Cole of Gahanna, Ohio, 71 years old. I doubt very much she knows her name is on these documents." She scrolled down. "The primary signatory on all 3 operating agreements, the person who actually controls the accounts, is listed as D. Cole. Diana." She turned in her chair and looked up at me. "Nathan signed the transfer authorizations on the Mercer Freight side, but the architecture of these LLCs, the structure, the timing, the use of a family member's name as the registered agent, this was not Nathan's idea." I pulled the second chair around and sat down heavily. "He's not smart enough for this." "He's smart enough," Paula said carefully. "But this is a different kind of smart. This is someone who has done this before or studied how it's done carefully enough to approximate experience." She turned back to the screen. I'm going to check Diana Cole against the Ohio Business Registry for the last 10 years. She typed. She waited. She made a small sound that was not quite a word. There, she said. 2017. Diana Cole listed as financial consultant for a small manufacturing company in Akron. That company dissolved in 2018 with unresolved creditor claims of $340,000. She pulled up another record. 2019. Different company, Hamilton County. Same pattern, Diana as consultant company dissolved creditors, unpaid $280,000 unaccounted for. She looked at me steadily. She has done this before, Hal. Nathan is not her first. The room felt smaller than it had when I walked in. She found him, I said. She found him specifically. Someone with access to a freight company's operating accounts, a father whose trust fund disbursements would eventually transfer to him, and enough personal resentment to look the other way. Paula nodded slowly. Yes. I think she went looking for exactly that combination. I thought about the night Nathan came home quiet after I turned down his expansion proposal. The dinner he had with Diana 2 weeks later that he mentioned as a work meeting. The slow, steady withdrawal that I had read as disappointment and left alone because I told myself he needed space to process it. I had handed Diana Cole a door, and she had walked straight through it. How long to complete the full report? I asked. 24 hours, Paula said. Maybe less. She looked at the folder from Dr. Howell, which she had not touched. Hal, is that what I think it is? Medical documentation, I said. Yes. She looked at me for a moment with an expression that was not pity but was close enough to its edges that I had to look away. Go check on your daughter-in-law, she said quietly. I'll call you when I have everything. The Fairfield Inn looked exactly like every other mid-range hotel on Airport Drive, beige exterior, automatic doors, a lobby that smelled of carpet cleaner, and the continental breakfast that had ended 3 hours ago. I had stayed in 100 hotels like this over 35 years of freight business. I had never been so relieved to walk into one. Claire answered on the second knock. She had the chain on, I could see one eye, and a strip of her face through the 2-inch gap before she recognized me and slid the chain free. Nathan drove past again this morning, she said, stepping back to let me in. Twice. Same silver car, same direction, slowing down at the entrance both times. He doesn't know which room, I said. He's guessing at the building. For now, she said. She looked better than she had at Lou's diner she had slept, eaten something changed out of the uniform. But the shadows under her eyes had not gone anywhere, and she moved with one hand near her belly the way she had been doing since I first saw her, that constant, unconscious checking. I set my jacket over the desk chair and sat on the edge of the bed facing her. I told her about Frank and the USB, about Paula and the LLC records, about Dr. Howell and the folder in my jacket pocket. I told her all of it straight the way I would have reported figures at a board meeting, because she had earned that, and because she was the only person in this situation who had been paying attention longer than I had. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Not the silence of someone who has nothing to say. The silence of someone organizing what they already knew into the new shape I had just given it. Diana's done this before, she said finally, not a question. 2 companies, Ohio. Same pattern both times. Claire nodded slowly, pressing her lips together. I heard her on the phone once, maybe 7 months ago, talking to someone I assumed it was a friend. She said the setup phase is always the hardest part, you just have to be patient with them. She looked at me. I wrote it in the notebook, page 31. I didn't know what it meant at the time. I thought about Diana sitting at my son's kitchen table, patient, unhurried, as though she had always belonged there, and Claire had never existed at all. Claire, I said. I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer honestly, even if you think the answer will upset me. She met my eyes steadily. Ask. The recordings on the old phone. How much did you get? She stood up and went to the closet, reached up to the top shelf, and brought down a phone in a sandwich bag, sealed and labeled with a date in marker. She handed it to me. 14 months, she said. I started in September of last year when I heard Diana on that phone call. I charged the phone at work. I told Nathan the charger was for a backup work device. She sat back down on the edge of the bed. I couldn't use the recordings directly because I wasn't sure about the legal situation. Ohio is a one-party consent state for recordings, which means I could legally record conversations I was part of. Conversations I only overheard in my own home are different. She paused. But as evidence supporting other documentation, Paula would know better than me how to use them. I turned the phone over in my hands. 14 months. While she was being erased from the lease and the bank account and the insurance policy. While she was cooking dinner for a woman wearing her clothes. She had been sitting in her own kitchen with an old phone hidden in a drawer, building the case that would eventually land in my jacket pocket. Claire. My voice came out rougher than I intended. You stayed in that house for 11 months after you knew about the medication, knowing what they were doing to me, knowing about the baby. I stopped, started again. You risked Lucas to protect me. Her chin came up. I risked Lucas to make sure you'd still be alive when it was over, she said quietly. There's a difference. My chest tightened until breathing required deliberate effort. I don't know how to. I stopped again. No, you don't have to, she said. Just finish it. I nodded. I set the phone carefully on the desk beside my jacket and stood up. I need to do something that is going to feel wrong, I said. Starting tomorrow morning, I am going to keep accepting Nathan's coffee. I am going to keep looking worse every time he sees me more tired, more confused, more like a man who is running out of time. I looked at her. I need him to think he's winning. Greedy people get careless when they think they're winning. Claire nodded. How long? Paula needs 24 hours to finish the financial report. Eddie Cross needs another 48 on surveillance. After that, I picked up my jacket. After that, it ends. My phone buzzed on the desk. Eddie Cross. I read the text and felt something cold settle behind my sternum. Subject N. Met with an estate attorney at private residence Sunday, 4 p.m. Meeting lasted 90 minutes. Also, Subject D met separately with travel agent, booked 2 tickets, destination unclear, departure window suggests 2 to 3 weeks. I read it twice. Then I held the phone out to Claire. She read it. Her face went very still in the way of someone who has just had a fear confirmed that they had been hoping was paranoia. They're not waiting anymore, she said. No, I said. They're not. She handed the phone back and pressed both hands against her belly, not the unconscious checking gesture this time. Something more deliberate. Protective. Then we're not waiting either, she said. No, I said. We are not. I said goodnight. I checked the deadbolt and the chain myself, before I left, testing both the way my father had taught me to check a load before pulling out of a freight yard. You make sure the cargo is secure before you drive. I walked to my truck in the cold parking lot and sat behind the wheel for a moment. 48 hours. I had 48 hours to become the most convincing sick old man in Columbus, Ohio. I started the engine and pulled out onto Airport Drive. 4 days passed in a strange, suspended rhythm, the rhythm of a man performing his own decline for an audience of one. Every morning, Nathan arrived with the coffee. Every morning I accepted it with both hands and thanked him and set it on the counter while his back was turned and poured it down the kitchen sink the moment his car left the driveway. Every morning I shuffled a little more than the day before, leaned on the counter a little harder, let my sentences trail off in the middle as though I had lost the thread. Nathan watched all of it with the careful, pleased attention of a man monitoring an investment. Paula delivered her completed report on Tuesday. It was 43 pages and documented every transfer, every LLC, every forged authorization. Eddie Cross delivered his surveillance package Wednesday morning, photographs, timestamps, and the name of the estate attorney Nathan had met with Sunday afternoon. Wednesday night, I sat at my kitchen table and neatly organized everything into a single accordion folder. Paula's report, Dr. Howell's medical documentation, the USB from Frank the sonogram, and Claire's letter, and Eddie's surveillance photographs. I sealed the folder with a rubber band and put it in the locked cabinet in my office where I kept the company's original incorporation papers. Then I called Detective Karen Walsh at Columbus PD. We had met 3 years earlier when someone had broken into one of my warehouses. She was thorough, and she did not grandstand. "I need to bring you a package tomorrow morning," I told her. "Financial fraud, attempted murder, corporate theft. I have full documentation." A beat of silence. "What time?" she said. 8 o'clock, I said. "I'll be here," she said. I hung up and went to check on the spare bedroom, the one I had spent the previous Saturday afternoon quietly converting while Nathan thought I was resting. A second-hand crib from Goodwill assembled with instructions I had to read twice. A second-hand dresser. A lamp with a soft bulb. Nothing fancy, nothing that needed to be fancy. I stood in the doorway of that small room for a long moment, with my hand on the frame, and thought about Margaret saying, "This is the most important thing that has happened in this house." My phone rang at 11:47 p.m. Claire. I answered before the second ring. "Hal." Her voice was tight and compressed in the specific way of someone speaking through pain they are trying to manage. My water broke. Every thought in my head cleared instantly. The accordion folder, Detective Walsh, Nathan, Diana, all of it replaced by a single, clean, uncomplicated urgency. "How far apart are the contractions?" I said, already moving toward the front door. "They started about 20 minutes ago," she said, and I heard her breath hitch and hold, and then release, slowly. "They're already 5 minutes apart. This is happening fast, Hal. I'm calling Roy right now," I said. "Stay on the phone with me. Don't open the door for anyone until Roy knocks 3 times. I hit Roy's number on my second phone while keeping Claire on the first. Roy picked up on the second ring, groggy but immediate. I gave him the room number and told him to pull to the side entrance, not the front. He did not ask why. 14 years, and he never asked why when my voice sounded like that. I was in my truck and backing out of the driveway when Claire made a sound on the phone that tightened every muscle in my body simultaneously, a sharp, involuntary exhale that she tried to suppress and could not. "Claire," I said, "talk to me. Keep talking." "I'm okay," she said, breathing through her nose in the deliberate pattern Dr. Park had apparently taught her. "I'm okay. They're getting closer. Roy is 4 minutes away," I said. "I am 12 minutes away. You are not doing this alone." "I know," she said. And then very quietly, almost to herself, "I haven't been alone since you walked through that kitchen door." I pushed the truck to 60 on Airport Drive and did not think about the speed limit. My second phone buzzed on the passenger seat. I glanced at it at a red light. Eddie Cross. A text sent 2 minutes ago. "Heads up N. Just left his apartment. Heading your direction on 270. Don't know if he made the hotel location or if it's coincidence. Watching. The light turned green. I pressed the accelerator down and did not lift it. 12 minutes had just become 8. Roy was already pulling up to the side entrance of the Fairfield Inn when I turned into the parking lot, which meant he had been driving before I called him, which meant he had been awake and ready, which was exactly the kind of man Roy Casper had been for 14 years, and which I had never properly told him I was grateful for. I left my truck running at the curb and went up the stairs 2 at a time, my knee screaming at me the whole way. The knee I had damaged falling off a loading dock in 1999 and had been managing with stubbornness ever since. Room 214. I knocked 3 times. Claire opened the door. She was dressed, bag in hand, one arm braced against the doorframe, and the expression on her face was the most concentrated version of human determination I had ever seen outside of a freight yard dispute. She was pale and damp at her hairline, and her knuckles on the doorframe had gone white. But her jaw was set, and her eyes were clear. "Another one just ended," she said. 4 minutes since the last?" "Let's go," I said. I took the bag. She took my arm, not leaning on it heavily, just maintaining contact, the way you keep a hand on a rope in the dark. We went down the hallway and the back stairs, avoiding the lobby, and I helped her into the back seat of Roy's car, with more care than I had handled anything in years. Roy pulled out before I had fully closed the door. "Ohio Health Riverside," I said. "Service entrance on McMillan." "I know it," Roy said, and accelerated onto Airport Drive without another word. In the back seat, Claire breathed through a contraction, with her forehead tipped forward and both hands pressed flat on her knees, the specific, focused stillness of someone who has been told exactly what to do and is executing it with everything they have. I kept my eyes on the road behind us. No silver car. Not yet. "Hal," Claire said when the contraction eased. Her voice was rough at the edges. "What happens if he shows up at the hospital? Dr. Park has private access protocols," I said. "I arranged it 2 weeks ago through the hospital's patient privacy office. Claire Sutton is admitted under a restricted file, no information released to anyone not on the approved contact list. Nathan Mercer is not on that list." She absorbed this. "You arranged it 2 weeks ago." 3, actually. She turned her head and looked at me in the dark of the back seat. "You knew this might happen early. I knew we needed to be ready," I said. "That's not the same thing." "But yes." Roy turned onto McMillan and killed the headlights as we approached the service entrance, my instruction from 3 weeks ago when I had walked this route myself on a Tuesday afternoon just to know it. The gate opened on a code I had been given by the facilities manager after a conversation and a substantial equipment donation that I was not sorry about for a single second. Dr. Susan Park was waiting. She was 50 Korean American, with the kind of steady, unhurried competence that you only develop by having seen every possible version of a situation and knowing exactly which levers to pull for each one. She had a gurney and 2 nurses, and she assessed Claire in approximately 4 seconds, while the nurses took the bag from my hand. "How far apart?" she said. 3 minutes, Claire said. "Maybe less." "Fully effaced," Dr. Park said to the nurses already moving. "Let's go." She looked back at me over her shoulder. "Mr. Mercer, waiting room is through those doors on the left. I'll come find you." "Is she going to be okay?" I said. The question came out stripped of everything except what it was. Dr. Park looked at me with the direct, measured honesty of a woman who did not make promises she couldn't keep and did not withhold reassurance she could legitimately offer. "She's strong and she's ready," she said. "So is he." Then the door swung shut and they were gone. I stood in the service corridor under fluorescent lights that hummed at a frequency designed, it seemed, to make everything feel more clinical than it already was. Roy appeared at my elbow. "You want coffee?" he said. "God, no," I said. "Sitting room's down the hall," he said. "I'll be outside." I walked to the waiting room and sat down in a chair that had the specific uncomfortable quality of hospital furniture everywhere, designed to be cleanable rather than restful. The room was empty at this hour. A television mounted in the corner played a home improvement show. On mute, a man in a flannel shirt, gesturing enthusiastically at a subfloor. I reached into my jacket and took out Margaret's phone. I was not looking for the video this time. I opened the notes application. Margaret had used it the way some people use a journal, short entries, undated, whatever she was thinking when she was thinking it. I had never read them. It had felt like going through mail that was not addressed to me. Tonight, I did not have the energy to maintain that particular boundary. I scrolled. Most of the notes were small things. Grocery lists. A quote she had liked from a book. A reminder to call her sister. A recipe for the lemon bars she made every Easter that I had never been able to replicate. Then, near the bottom of the list, a longer entry. The timestamp on it was 18 months before she died. I read it slowly. I am scared of the wrong things. I spend time worrying about Hal's blood pressure, and whether Nathan is eating properly, and whether the gutters need cleaning before winter. I do not spend enough time on the things that will matter when I am gone. Nathan learned to love by watching us. We were not always good examples. Hal worked too much. I let him. We were happy, but we were also absent, both of us, in ways I don't think either of us has fully admitted. I keep thinking about that girl, Claire, the one Nathan brought home in March. She has steady eyes, the kind that have seen hard things and decided to stay open anyway. I think she might be better for him than he deserves right now. I hope he grows into her. I should write this down properly. I should tell Hal. He doesn't read things I leave on the counter, but he reads things I hand to him directly. I keep forgetting to hand it to him directly. I'm going to forget again. I can feel it. Some things you mean to say, and the days get in the way, and then the days run out. I sat in the empty waiting room with Margaret's phone in both hands and the home improvement show flickering silently in the corner, and felt the specific grief of reading a message that was meant for you and arrived too late. She had tried. She had written it down, which was her version of trying. And then the days had gotten in the way she had known they would, and she had never handed it to me directly, and I had never read it, and here we were. "Mr. Mercer." Dr. Park was standing in the doorway. I stood up so fast the chair scraped back against the linoleum. "Is she?" "She's fine," Dr. Park said, and the two words landed like something structural giving way in a good direction. "He's here. 2:43 a.m., 5 pounds 14 ounces. A small, genuine smile crossed her face. "He came out arguing with somebody, not sure who, but he's got opinions." My throat closed completely. "Can I started. "Come on," she said. The delivery room was warmer than the corridor someone had thought to adjust the temperature, which seemed like such a specific and human kindness that I noticed it even in that moment. The lights had been dimmed from the harsh, clinical brightness of the hallway to something softer, the kind of light that acknowledges that what just happened in this room was not a medical procedure, but a beginning. Claire was propped up against the raised bed, hair damp against her forehead, a thin hospital blanket pulled up to her waist. She looked like someone who had just run a marathon and won it exhausted, past the point where exhaustion has a name, but underneath that, something else. Something lit from the inside. A nurse was doing something efficient and quiet at the warmer in the corner, Dr. Park stepped aside to let me in. "Hey," Claire said. Her voice was wrecked, raw, and hoarse, and the most honest sound I had heard in months. "We made it." "You made it," I said. "I drove fast and worried. That's not the same thing." She laughed, one short, cracked sound that turned into a wince, and then back into a smile. The nurse turned from the warmer and crossed the room toward me, and I understood what was happening before it fully registered, and I took a step forward without deciding to. She placed him in my arms. He was wrapped in a white blanket with blue stripes at the edges, the standard hospital kind, soft from 1,000 washings. He was small in a way that surprised me, even though I had been told the weight. 5 pounds, 14 ounces sounds like a number until you are holding it, and then it becomes something else entirely. Something that fits in the crook of one arm and weighs less than a bag of flour, and is somehow the heaviest thing you have ever held. His eyes were closed. His mouth was making small, intermittent movements, practicing something, though what I could not have said. His hands were fisted at his chest, with the absolute conviction of someone who has strong feelings about the arrangement of their fingers. I looked at his face for a long time. Then I looked at his left shoulder, where the blanket had folded back slightly. A small mark on the skin, irregular, roughly oval, about the size of a thumbprint. Brownish pink against the newborn red of him. I had a mark exactly like it on my own left shoulder. My father had one. His father before him, as far as anyone knew. Nathan did not have it. This child, Claire's son, the grandson I had not known existed 4 days ago, carried it instead. My throat did something that I was not in a position to manage gracefully, so I did not try. "Hey," I said. My voice came out barely above a whisper. "Hey, Lucas." I adjusted my arm slightly, bringing him a little closer. "I'm your grandfather. I know we're meeting later than we should have. That's on me, and I'm sorry for it." I paused. "But I'm here now, and I'm not going anywhere. You have my word on that, and I don't give my word lightly." His mouth stopped its small movements. I do not know if newborns can actually respond to voices at 2:50 in the morning after 5 hours of labor, but in that moment, it felt as though he was listening, and I was not going to argue with it. Claire made a sound from the bed, not a word, just a sound. When I looked up, her eyes were full, the tears spilling over without apparent effort on her part, the way water goes over a dam when the level gets high enough. "He has the mark," she said. "He has the mark," I confirmed. She pressed both hands over her mouth and cried properly, then shoulders shaking, the full release of it. Everything she had been holding compressed for 7 months, finally coming out in one long, shuddering exhale. I stood with Lucas in my arms and let her cry without trying to stop it, because some things need to happen completely. After a while, she lowered her hands and wiped her face with the back of her wrist and took a long, unsteady breath. "What do we do now?" she said. I looked down at Lucas. His fist had relaxed slightly. One small finger had extended, pointing at nothing in particular, or perhaps at everything. "Now," I said, "I go make sure nobody gets through that door who isn't supposed to." My phone buzzed in my jacket pocket. I shifted Lucas carefully to one arm and checked it with my free hand. Nathan Mercer. Calling, not texting. I declined it. Then I read the text that came immediately after. "I know she's there. I know about the baby. You have until morning to make this right, old man. Or I will." My arm tightened slightly around Lucas, not enough to disturb him, just enough to feel the weight of him, solid and real and here. I typed back 4 words. "Come ahead. I'm ready." I left Ohio Health Riverside at 4:15 in the morning. Roy drove me home without being asked, which was exactly right. I sat in the passenger seat for once, something I almost never did, and watched the Columbus streets go by in the particular amber quiet of a weeknight at 4 a.m., when the city belongs to shift workers and insomniacs and men who have just become grandfathers for the first time. At the house on Elmwood Drive, I thanked Roy and told him to go home and sleep. He said he would be back by 7. I said that was not necessary. He said he knew and left anyway. I went inside and made real coffee my own from the tin in the cabinet that Nathan had never touched, and sat at the kitchen table and called Detective Karen Walsh at 4:30 a.m. She picked up on the second ring. "Lucas is here," I said. £5, 14 ounces. Mother and baby are secure at Riverside under the restricted protocol. "Good," she said. Her voice was alert in a way that suggested she had not been sleeping deeply. "And you're ready to move this morning?" "Yes," I said. "I'm going to call Nathan at 7 and tell him I had a bad night, that I need him to come by, that I want to talk about the company." I paused. "He'll come. He's been waiting for me to show weakness long enough that he won't question it." "I'll have 2 officers in position by 6:30, she said. "I'll be in the back hallway off the kitchen. You give me the word and we move." "The word is Lucas," I said. A brief silence. "Understood," she said. "Get some rest if you can." I did not rest. Instead, I went to the locked cabinet in my office and took out the accordion folder I had sealed 2 nights ago. I carried it to the kitchen table and opened it under the overhead light and went through every document one final time, not looking for errors, because Paula did not make errors, but because I needed to hold each piece of it in my hands and understand what it meant before I used it as a weapon. 14 wire transfers. A forensic accounting report 43 pages long. Medical documentation from Dr. Howell with my blood panel attached. The original sonogram and Claire's letter. Eddie's surveillance photographs showing Nathan entering the estate attorney's office on Sunday afternoon. A printout of the insurance beneficiary amendment with Nathan's digital signature and timestamp. $1.2 million stolen through shell companies registered in his girlfriend's mother's name. $15 million of life insurance redirected to himself, filed the same week he started poisoning my coffee. I stacked everything back into the folder and set it in the center of the kitchen table and went to stand at the window. The sky over Elmwood Drive was beginning to lighten at the edges, that thin gray that comes before the actual dawn when the darkness has given up, but the light hasn't fully committed yet. I had watched this sky from this window for 31 years. Margaret used to say that the best part of living in Ohio was that you always knew exactly where you stood with the weather. It was never subtle about what it intended to do. She had meant it as a mild complaint. I had always taken it as a point of pride. At 7 a.m., I called Nathan. "Dad." He answered on the first ring, which told me he had been awake and waiting. "I tried to reach you last night, so I know," I said. I let my voice carry the right amount of tired, not overdone, just the genuine exhaustion of a man who had been awake since midnight, which I was. "I had a rough night, son. I need you to come by this morning. I want to talk about what happens with the company if—" I stopped. Let it hang. "Just come by, please." A pause. I could hear him breathing. "I'll be there in an hour," he said. He arrived in 53 minutes, which told me everything about how eagerly he had been waiting for exactly this phone call. I was sitting at the kitchen table when he came through the back door, the accordion folder in front of me. My hands folded on top of it, the real coffee cooling in a mug to my right. I had not touched Nathan's coffee this morning. There was no need to pretend anymore. He came into the kitchen and stopped. He looked at the folder. He looked at me. He looked at the folder again. "What's that?" he said. Sit down, Nathan, I said. Something shifted in his face, a quick recalibration, the way a person's expression changes when they have walked into a room expecting one thing and found another. He pulled out the chair across from me and sat down slowly, his eyes staying on the folder. You look better this morning, he said carefully. I thought you said you had a bad night. I lied, I said. I've been doing a lot of that lately, practicing. I held his gaze. You taught me how important it was. His jaw tightened. Dad. Paula Hines completed her report 2 days ago, I said. I opened the folder and slid the top document across the table. 14 transfers, 18 months, $1.2 million through 3 LLCs registered in Sandra Cole's name. Your authorizations are on every single one. I slid the next document across. Dr. James Howell's medical report. Amlodipine at 3 to 4 times therapeutic dose in my bloodstream, consistent with 10 weeks of daily exposure. The coffee sample tested positive. Another document. Insurance beneficiary amendment. $15 million. Filed the same week the dizzy spells started. I set my hands flat on the table. You want to keep going, or do you have questions? Nathan sat very still. The color had drained from his face in a way I had never seen before. Not the flush of anger I had expected, but a true blanching, the blood going somewhere else entirely, leaving him looking hollowed out under the kitchen light. How long have you known? He said. His voice was stripped down to something I barely recognized. Long enough, I said. He pressed both hands over his face and dragged them down slowly. When his hands came away, what was left in his expression was something I had not been prepared for. Not defiance, not more manipulation, but a kind of raw, exhausted collapse like a structure that had been under too much load for too long and had finally exceeded its tolerance. I didn't... He started, stopped. Diana said the doses were safe. She said it would just make you tired enough to sign things, to agree to things. He looked up at me and his eyes were red at the rims. I swear to God I didn't know she was trying to... Nathan. My voice came out quiet and flat. Don't. His mouth closed. I found your note, I said. The one from when you were 19. A man who builds things that last. You wrote that. I looked at him. What happened to him? Nathan flinched as though I had struck him. For a moment his face crumpled, completely ugly, unguarded, the face of someone who has just been asked the one question they cannot answer and cannot avoid. His hands came up to cover it, and he pressed them there, his shoulders going forward, a sound coming from him that was not quite a sob, but was right at the edge of one. I don't know, he said into his palms. I don't know, Dad. I'm sorry. Lucas Harold Mercer was born at 2:43 this morning, I said. 5 pounds 14 ounces. He has the family mark. Nathan's hands came down from his face. He stared at me. You have a son, I said. And because of what you and Diana did, he came into the world in a hotel room emergency, instead of a proper hospital arrival with his mother living in a storage room for 4 months, and his grandfather not knowing he existed. I let that land completely before I spoke again. Lucas. From the back hallway, Detective Karen Walsh stepped into the kitchen doorway. Nathan turned at the sound of her footsteps. 2 uniformed officers appeared behind her. Nathan Mercer. Walsh said, badge in hand, her voice carrying the calm authority of someone who had done this hundreds of times and found no satisfaction in it. I have a warrant for your arrest on charges including financial fraud, theft by deception, and criminal poisoning. Please stand up and keep your hands where I can see them. Nathan stood. He did not fight it. He looked at me one last time over the kitchen table, over the folder, over the coffee mug, over the morning light, coming through the window where I had watched the sky for 31 years. "Was any of it real?" he said. "Did you ever actually—" "I loved you every day of your life," I said. "Even today. That's what makes this the hardest thing I have ever done." The handcuffs closed. The police took Nathan out through the front door at 8:51 in the morning. I stood at the kitchen window and watched the cruiser pull away from the curb on Elmwood Drive. And then I stood there for another minute after it disappeared around the corner, because my legs had decided that sitting down was a reasonable response to the last 6 hours, and I was inclined to agree with them. Detective Walsh came back inside after walking the officers out. "Diana Cole," I said. "Eddie Cross flagged her with the airport authority at Columbus Express last night." Walsh said, setting her folder on the counter. "She booked a one-way to Miami under her own name, which tells you how confident she was that this would go differently this morning." She looked at me steadily. "They picked her up at the gate at 7:40. She had 2 checked bags and a laptop. The laptop has already been flagged for forensic review. I thought about Diana sitting in a departure gate with 2 packed bags, confident that by this time this morning, I would have signed whatever Nathan put in front of me or been too incapacitated to stop him. I thought about her patient-specific intelligence, the LLC structure, the 2 prior companies, the years of practice, and felt a cold, impersonal recognition that some people are simply built for a particular kind of damage and spend their lives finding new places to apply it. Good, I said. That was all I had for Diana Cole. Walsh gathered her folder and paused at the door. "The DA's office will want a statement from you this week. Paula Hines's report and Dr. Howell's documentation are as clean as anything I've seen. This won't be complicated." She looked at me with something that was not quite sympathy, but was adjacent to it. "You did this right, Mr. Mercer." "I did it late," I said. She considered that. "Better late than buried," she said and left. I sat back down at the kitchen table. The accordion folder was still spread open in front of me, documents I had carried for days, the architecture of everything Nathan and Diana had built against me. I stacked them back into order and tied the folder shut and set it by the door for Walsh's office. Then I called Frank Delgado. He answered on the 3rd ring, the sound of an air wrench somewhere behind him, going quiet as he picked up. "It's done," I said. "Both of them." A pause. "Good," Frank said. The same word I had used about Diana and carrying the same weight. "Frank," I stopped, started again. "I have a proposition for you. Not as an apology. I'm done trying to pay you back for something that can't be paid back. This is a separate thing." I looked out the kitchen window at the bare November yard. "I need a director of operations at Mercer Freight. Someone who knows how the actual work gets done. Someone I trust to tell me when I'm wrong." I paused. "The salary is real and the job is real, and you can say no and it won't change anything between us." The air wrench started up again somewhere in the background, then stopped. "Send me the job description," Frank said. "I'll read it." "That's all I'm asking?" I said. I hung up and sat for a moment in the quiet kitchen. The coffee in my mug had gone completely cold. I drank it anyway. Then I drove to Ohio Health Riverside. Claire was awake when I came in, sitting up in the hospital bed with Lucas against her chest. His face turned into her neck, both of them existing in the specific mutual peace of people who have been through something together and come out the other side of it. She looked up when I pushed the door open. "How did it go?" she said. "Nathan is in custody," I said. "Diana was picked up at the airport this morning. It's over." She closed her eyes for a moment, opened them. Her chin trembled once hard, and then she pressed her lips together and held it. Okay, she said quietly. Okay. I pulled the chair to the side of the bed and sat down. Lucas stirred slightly at the movement, a small adjustment, a tiny fist opening and closing against Claire's shoulder. There's something I want to ask you, I said. You don't have to answer right now. You don't have to answer at all if you don't want to. She looked at me. I want to start the legal process to recognize you as family, I said. Formally, permanently, you and Lucas both. I held her gaze. Margaret would have wanted that. But more than that, I want it. Because you are the person who kept this family from disappearing, and you deserve to have it be yours as much as it is mine. Claire looked down at Lucas for a long moment. When she looked back up, her eyes were full again, but different from last night. Last night had been relief. This was something else. Something that looked quietly and without performance like the beginning of being home. Yes, she said. I'd like that very much, Hal. Spring came late to Columbus that year. The last of the snow did not fully release its grip on the yard at Elmwood Drive until the third week of March. And even then, it went reluctantly retreating to the shaded corner by the fence, holding on in a thin gray strip for 2 weeks past, when everything else had thawed. By early April, though, the maple in the front yard had finally made up its mind, and the first leaves were out small and bright and unreservedly green in the way that only new things are. I noticed them from the kitchen window on a Tuesday morning, while I was making coffee and thinking about nothing important. It struck me that I had not noticed the leaves coming in for 3 years, not since Margaret died. I had lived through 2 springs without seeing them. I had been too busy performing my own slow disappearance to pay attention to anything that was quietly becoming. The trial had concluded in mid-March. Nathan pleaded guilty on all counts: financial fraud, theft by deception, criminal poisoning. The assistant district attorney told me the evidence package Paula had assembled was, in her words, cleaner than anything she had seen in 11 years of financial crime prosecution. Nathan received 17 years. He would be eligible for parole consideration after 12, which I understood, and did not have strong feelings about either way. He was my son, and I loved him, and I hoped that 12 years would be enough time for him to find his way back to the person who had written 9 words on a piece of paper at 19 years old. I did not attend the sentencing. I stayed home with Lucas. Diana Cole received 13 years on compounded charges: fraud, conspiracy, criminal poisoning, and 3 counts related to her prior companies in Akron and Hamilton County, which the DA's office had moved to reopen based on Paula's documentation. The woman who had spent years studying how to dismantle things other people had built was going to have a considerable amount of time to reconsider her methodology. I did not think about Diana Cole very much after that. Some things you close like a file cabinet and lock. The legal process to formally recognize Claire and Lucas as family was completed the first week of April. Claire Sutton Mercer by the court's declaration. Lucas Harold Mercer by his own birthright. The attorney who handled it was a woman named Barbara Keene, who had been doing family law in Columbus for 22 years, and who cried slightly when she handed me the finalized papers, which she apologized for, and which I told her was entirely unnecessary to apologize for. I framed the papers and hung them in the hallway beside the photograph from Put-in Bay. The second week of April, I drove to Lou's Diner on my own on a Wednesday afternoon when the lunch rush had ended, and the place had settled into the particular quiet of mid-afternoon, the booths empty, and the coffee maker cycling through its idle hum. Linda Cho was behind the counter restocking the pie display. She looked up when I came in. She set down the pie server and waited. I sat down on one of the counter stools. Not the corner booth, not today, not for this. And put both hands flat on the counter. I owe you something I don't know how to properly calculate, I said. You gave my daughter-in-law a place to sleep when she had nowhere. You gave her work when she needed to feel like she was still standing on her own feet. You kept her safe for 4 months without knowing who I was, or whether any of it would matter. I held Linda's gaze. I know you didn't do it for me. I know you did it for her. But it got her to the place where she could find me, and I need you to understand what that means. Linda looked at me for a long moment, with the steady, unsentimental expression of a woman who had been running a diner for 22 years and had long since stopped being surprised by what walked through her door. She's a good person, Linda said simply. You don't need a reason beyond that. No, I said. You don't. I reached into my jacket and set a sealed envelope on the counter between us. This is a purchase offer for Lou's Diner, full market value independently appraised. The terms include a lifetime management agreement. You run this place exactly as you always have for as long as you want to. Nothing changes except who holds the deed. I kept my hand on the envelope. You can say no. I won't be insulted and it won't change anything between us. But I wanted you to have the option of not worrying about whether the building's owner decides to sell out from under you. Linda looked at the envelope. She looked at me. How'd you know I was renting? She said. I asked around, I said. She picked up the envelope and turned it over in her hands without opening it. Then she set it back down and poured me a cup of coffee, the real kind, not decaf, and slid it across the counter. I'll have my nephew read it, she said. He's a paralegal. That's all I'm asking, I said. I drank the coffee. It was good. It was the best cup of coffee I had tasted in a long time, which I recognized had less to do with the coffee than with the fact that I could drink it without wondering what was in it. On the second Saturday of April, Claire's parents drove up from West Virginia. Doug and Patty Sutton arrived in a 10-year-old Subaru with 2 casseroles, a hand-knitted blanket for Lucas, and the particular energy of people who had been worried about their daughter for a long time and were only now beginning to believe that the worry was over. Doug was 62, a large, quiet man with Claire's steady eyes, who shook my hand with both of his and said thank you, in a voice that carried everything it needed to without elaboration. Patty was smaller and louder, and cried twice before she had been in the house 10 minutes first, when she saw Claire, and then immediately again when Claire put Lucas in her arms. Frank Delgado arrived at noon. He came in his work clothes. He had been at the warehouse all morning, because his first week as director of operations at Mercer Freight had involved an inventory audit that he had voluntarily extended past Friday. He nodded at me when he came through the back door, accepted coffee from Claire, and spent 20 minutes talking freight logistics with Doug, who had driven trucks for 17 years before his knees gave out, and the two of them got along immediately and completely in the way of people who speak the same first language. I sat in the yard in the afternoon light with Lucas in my lap. He was 5 weeks old and had recently discovered that the world contained things worth looking at, and he was exercising this discovery with great seriousness, his dark eyes tracking the movement of leaves in the April wind with the concentrated attention of a scientist observing a new phenomenon. Claire sat in the chair beside me, her shoulder close to mine, not touching, but near enough that I was aware of it. From inside the house came the sounds of Patty washing dishes and Doug telling Frank something about highway grades in West Virginia that Frank was responding to with what sounded like genuine interest. Frank seems good, Claire said. He's exactly what the company needed, I said. Which is someone who tells me when I'm wrong before I've committed to being wrong. She smiled at the yard. Margaret would have liked him. Margaret would have fed him 3 times and asked him about his family, I said. In that order. Claire laughed, the real kind, the kind that came from somewhere unguarded. Lucas looked up at the sound of it. I looked down at him, looking up at her, at his grandmother's name that he would one day learn at the yard that had held 31 years of a life I had built, board by board and contract by contract, and morning by morning at the leaves that I had finally remembered to notice. I had spent 35 years building Mercer Freight, warehouses, contracts, trucks, accounts, things made of metal and paper and handshakes. I had believed that was the structure. That was what lasted. But the thing in my lap weighed 5 pounds and 14 ounces and had a mark on his shoulder that connected him to people he would never meet. And he was looking at his mother with the absolute unearned trust of someone who had arrived in the world already knowing where home was. "Margaret," I said quietly to no one in particular, and to her specifically, "I think I finally understand what you were trying to tell me." The April wind moved through the maple. The leaves turned in it bright and new and unreservedly green. I held my grandson and stayed right where I was. Looking back on everything that happened, I keep returning to one simple truth that took me 67 years to fully understand. You can build a fortune with your hands, but you cannot buy back the moments you were too busy to notice. I am not proud of the father I was. I gave Nathan everything except the one thing that mattered: my actual presence. I was in the building, but never really in the room. And a child who grows up watching an empty chair learns eventually to fill it with something dangerous. Do not make the mistake I made. Do not measure your worth by the size of your company or the balance of your accounts. Measure it by whether the people who needed you actually felt you there. I learned that lesson almost too late, and the cost was a son I lost twice. Once to absence, once to a courtroom. I believe God allowed the truth to surface when He did, not a moment sooner than necessary, not a moment later than survivable. That is the only way I can explain Claire finding me in that diner on that particular Friday night, with that particular notebook in her apron pocket. These grandpastries do not exist to entertain. They exist because someone needs to hear them. This revenge story is not about anger. It is about what happens when love arrives too late and justice arrives just in time. And if these grandpastries have taught me anything worth passing on, it is this: protect the people in front of you before life forces you to go searching for them. If this revenge story reached something real inside you, if any part of Hal's journey felt familiar, leave a comment and tell me what you would have done differently. Share this with someone who needs it. And if these grandpastries have earned a place in your week, subscribe so you never miss what comes next. Thank you for staying with me all the way to the end. And a gentle reminder, some details in the stories ahead have been fictionalized for storytelling and reflection purposes. If that style of content is not for you, feel free to step away and find something that speaks to your heart better. No hard feelings and no judgment whatsoever.